Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
Here's a little tip you can use around the house or out in your garage. With more and more import cars and import technology, we're seeing more things assembled with Phillips screws. They work real well for putting things together, but sometimes they're difficult to get apart when they're rusted without stripping the head. Here's a little trick to help you loosen them. If you've got a little screw bit out of a screwdriver multi-bit set, hold it in a vice grip, place it onto the screw, and give it a sharp rap with a hammer. Like that. A lot of times that'll loosen up the screw enough by breaking the rust that you can get it loose without stripping it. One more thing, don't use your screwdrivers for this because the handles aren't made for pounding on and sometimes you'll break them.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
If you've got a bolt or a nut that's seized up or rusted up that's difficult to loosen, I'll show you a nifty way to do it by stretching the nut. If you can get it up against a hard surface and hit it on alternate sides, you can actually stretch that nut on the bolt. Watch. If you can't get it on a hard surface, use two hammers. One on one side and one to hit with. Like that. You can use this on pipe fittings as well by simply working around them and stretching them away from the part that's rusted in. A word of caution, don't reuse the pipe fitting because you may crack it while you're doing this.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
Have you ever had that problem while trying to start a screw in a really difficult place? Here's a little tip you can use around the home or the shop to start slot head screws, Robertson or Phillips. Most mechanics have got screw starters like this, but you don't need to buy one if you're not going to use it that often. Here's what you do. Take that tough to start screw, little piece of masking tape, put it over that screw, and put it against the shaft of your screwdriver. Now you can reach way in there, start that tough little screw, take your screwdriver out and remove your tape so you don't have any stuck under the head of the screw when you tighten it, and finish tightening it up.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
Have you ever had a problem like that with a rattling wheel disc on your car? You may have one of about three problems. You may have kids putting stones down the inside of your hubcap. You could have a loose center, or you may have a loose spoke if you've got a spoke wheel. Here's a quick fix for it. Take it off your car, turn it upside down, find that loose spoke, clean it up real well, and put a dab of household silicone on it. It's great stuff, doesn't rust. If you've got a loose center, tighten up your bolts. If they're seized up, put a dab of silicone around them and tighten it up real well. Give it a couple hours to dry, put it back on your car.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
I want to talk for a minute about radiator hoses. They're an overlooked item on a lot of vehicles. I've known people who've changed radiators, thermostats, and water pumps because they've got a collapsed rad hose. The way to look for that is to feel them. Look for soft spots in them, and especially at the elbows where they turn corners. This is an elbow out of a radiator hose that I cut apart. I want to show you the tracking inside this, just from abrasion and from rust particles moving through this system. If this hose splits in this area, here's what can happen. Radiator hoses are made up of three parts: an outside layer, a cord, and an inside layer. If you get a radiator hose that splits the inside layer, it can collapse into your coolant flow and cause overheating. This is something you can't find by looking down it. It may happen when the car is running. So about every 5 years, change it.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
These car ramps are a great idea to get underneath your car, especially if you're a little overweight like me. But the problem with them is, when you're trying to drive your car up, they sometimes want to move away on hard surfaces. We've got a tip for you brought in by one of the guys on our crew whose grandfather told him this. If you can find a piece of rubber or web belting like that, draw yourself a couple little marks right here and drill some holes. Get a little 5/16 or 1/4 inch carriage bolt and bolt that on. Here's what you've got. Next time you drive your car up, the weight of your front wheel will hold the ramp when you move your car up. Remember, if you're using these kind of ramps, make sure you block your wheels and set your emergency brake.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
Here's a little tip that you can use to get a bolt into a really restricted place that's just too far to reach. This is a door post on a car. I have to get a bolt here and I have to put it in through here. I went to my hardware store and bought a piece of 16-2 electrical wire. Just soft copper wire. I dipped it in contact cement and put a bolt in contact cement and stuck it on the end like that. What you've got now is a 9 or 10 inch finger that you can reach way up into hidden places with and start a bolt from the inside of a completely closed in area. Just pull your wire out, hold your bolt with a little flat putty knife, and put your door hinge or whatever back on.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
It's a sad thing, but sometimes in our society these days, this kind of thing happens. This is a remote control mirror, and if you've got to change that, it's going to cost you about 75 bucks in the better part of your next day off. When I was down in my automotive department store, I found this little stick-on mirror for a replacement. The manufacturer supplies it with a little sticky strip, and if your old glass is still in place, you can use that to put it on. I'd suggest contact cement because those shrink sometimes and dry. I use some silicone because it's a good glue for outside for filling gaps. I'm just going to put that in place like that. Glue always works better if you can keep some tension on it. I got a little block of wood there and an elastic band. We're just going to hook it up like that, put it in place and let it harden. Before you go shopping for one, take a little time and cut yourself a cardboard pattern. It'll help you find your model easier.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
Oh, wonderful. Friday night and I got a flat tire. You know, if you can loosen wheel nuts on these cars with this little toy wrench that the manufacturer gives you, you should be playing football on Sundays or wrestling on Saturday nights. Here's a little tip for you. Go down to a hardware store that sells plumbing supplies. Ask them for 2 feet of 3/4 inch black pipe. It'll cost you about $2. What you got there is a dandy little snipe that you can put over top of that wrench to get off those super tight wheel nuts. Don't use it to tighten them back up because you might strip them. If you want to carry it in your trunk, wrap some heat duct tape around it, throw it in there, and that'll keep it from rattling.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
If you've got a problem with a dome light that won't turn off all the time, you may have a problem with the little switch that does that. The problem may be wear in your car door. In the old days, the switches that contacted the door were adjustable, but nowadays, most of them just snap into place. So if you get some wear here, you may not have enough metal left to push that in. Here's a little 10-cent fix for that. Get yourself some rough sandpaper and rough up the area where the button makes contact. Get yourself a dime and rough up that on one side. Get some household contact cement, put a little dab on there, a little dab on the dime, give it about a minute to set up, and stick it in place. It'll give you enough extra space to shut your light off.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
If you drive around a lot with dirty hands like I do, you'll get the inside panels of your car and your armrests really dirty. This stuff won't clean off real well with a rag because it's all down in the little cracks in the vinyl. So you can spend about $50 buying all kinds of fancy things, or you can get yourself a pail of soapy water and a simple old scrub brush. A brush will get into all those tough little spots in the vinyl. Get into all the little nooks and crannies, all those fancy details that the manufacturers put on for us. Down on your kickboards, the brush will scrub it off. For real fine work, get yourself a toothbrush. Works great for little jobs.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
If you get a little bit of movement in the hood on your car, or a little unevenness here, here's your problem. Let's lift the hood. This is a little stop bumper made out of rubber that stops your hood from coming down too far. On this car, it's got a little Phillips screw in the center and a little 12mm lock nut. Let's loosen that, and I'll show you. That screws up and down. You can set it for higher or lower. You might have to open and close your hood 20 times, and when you get it, just lock that little nut in place. On this van over here, we've got something that looks like a plastic spring, but that's actually a set of threads. So you can turn that down or turn it back up to set it for high and low. If you've still got a squeak, head for the kitchen, get some dish soap. Put one drop on there and that'll keep it squeak free for about 6 months.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute. Let's take a break for a Mechanic Minute.
I want to show you a little thing about wheel balancing. Tire shops put little lead weights on the inside and outside of your wheel to balance your tires. Here's a kind of an embarrassing thing that happened to me a few years ago. I was doing a lot of driving out in the country in some heavy mud and rainy weather, and I thought that I'd lost a wheel weight because when I got back on the pavement, I had a little vibration in the front end of my car. I went to my favorite tire shop and I said, "Harry, I think I've lost a wheel weight." Here's what he showed me. He said, "Bob, you've got about 10 ounces of mud packed into the back of your wheel." I cleaned the mud out, he balanced the tire, and it was perfect. Check the inside of your wheels before you go to the tire shop. See if you got some mud in there.
Now you can do it in a Mechanic Minute.